Yesterday, President Trump issued a last warning to Hamas, calling on the terrorist group to release all the hostages they are holding or, quote, it is over for you. President's statement, which was posted on his Truth Social platform, came after he met in the Oval Office with 8 freed hostages who shared their heartbreaking stories and stressed to him the urgency of returning the remaining captives from Gaza. Now, with President Trump's clear commitment to helping Israel finish the job, well, Hamas realized it's fighting a war it cannot win. With me now in studio to talk about this more is David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate in the office of the Israeli Prime Minister. David, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Tony, and thank you for joining us yourself.
Well, it's good to be here in Jerusalem. It's almost like home away from home. Let's talk about this. Yesterday, the president, before I get into the president's comments, I want to go back really to set the stage, because you heard that quote this week from the Secretary General of the United Nations saying the only way for peace in the Middle East is a two-state solution with a divided Jerusalem as the government of both, is the capital city for both nations. I mean, isn't that what we tried, what was tried in Gaza?
Well, to all of us here in Israel, Tony, the United Nations, which should be a force for good in the world, is actually the opposite. Everyone here in Israel knows that, and I think enlightened people around the world recognize that as well, because Antonio Guterres has never failed to miss the opportunity to call out the villains for who they are, and that is Hamas, the genocidal, murderous organization. Look, a Palestinian state which seeks to replace Israel, as almost every single Palestinian leader says openly, is simply no answer whatsoever.
Now, I'm going to talk later about there's a moving or a growing movement, I should say, here in Israel to declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. I know there's a number of issues, talked with the Prime Minister about that this week. But when you look at Gaza, Judea and Samaria, which is in the center of the country as opposed to a small strip down in the southern part on the Mediterranean, is 24 times the size of Gaza. If Gaza didn't work out with self-government from the Palestinians, how are Israelis expected to believe it will work if Judea and Samaria is turned over to the Palestinian Arab state?
Absolutely, Tony. You know, in 2005, this was an experiment. We pulled all of our people, every single Jew, out of Gaza. And the idea was, let's see what the Gazans can do with it. Let's see what the Palestinians can do with it. They turned it into a large operating base of terrorism, from which we have just suffered the worst day of Jew killing since the Holocaust, and certainly in this country's history. We've seen the mistake that was made. We understand that Palestinians, given self-rule, very often turn to terrorism, so that can be no resolution whatsoever in this part of the world. After October the 7th, we're on our guard. We were taken by surprise on October the 7th. We will not be taken by surprise again.
President Trump, after meeting with freed hostages, made very clear hostages need to be released from Gaza. They need to be home. And this is it. Time is out. We're moving forward. Now, I want to go back a month ago before the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, met with the president's first head of state visit. In fact, we met the night before. I'm told that the president viewed prior to that meeting the video footage that came out of Israel based upon cell phone footage and security cameras. I watched that video myself. It is beyond words in terms of the brutality. I can only describe it as demonic, what took place on that day, October the 3rd. That appeared to have moved the president into a very bold position last month. It would appear to me that his meeting with the hostages to hear firsthand what happened to them has moved him even further.
Look, our health ministry released yesterday that up to 40% of our hostages' body weight has been taken off. They've lost 40% of their body mass. They've lived in starvation conditions. They've lost teeth. Their eyesight has been ruined. And we also know that the psychological condition will obviously take a lot longer to heal. Tony, this is a death cult. Yeah. It's a death cult. The president recognizes that. There is no peace with a death cult. A death cult needs to be destroyed. Our culture teaches us to love life, to prolong life. Their culture teaches death. They yearn for death. That is why there is no cooperation, no coexistence with the Hamas terrorist organization. End of.
And I said October the 3rd and October the 7th. You mentioned mistakes were made. And I've met with a number of Israeli leaders over the last year and a half and discussed that. In part, you just talked about the ideology. There's no peace with a death cult. Prior to October the 7th, there was a sense that it was an issue of economic prosperity and well-being that was the motivation for Gazans and and Hamas. That clearly is not right. It is an ideology that is driving them, and you have to deal with the ideology. It sounds as if, based upon my conversations, that Israel's come to that understanding.
There's no education like experience, and we've lived it. There have been catastrophic mistakes made in this country. The idea that we can coexist with this terrorist organization right on our borders. You know, this is not a land far away. You've seen it for yourself. It's right over our fence. It's a matter of meters away from where our people live. It's a death cult. It must be destroyed, which is why the key war aims of this war, of this government, of our prime minister, has been to destroy Hamas's military and its governing capability, and to ensure that Hamas can never coexist again in Gaza. We won't be threatened again by Gaza. You know, we were taken by surprise. There have been catastrophic errors made. This country is learning those errors the hard way, but living next to a death cult is simply not an answer. We will be victorious by destroying this organization.
Let's talk about that, David Mencer, about the path forward, the stated goals of this war effort. Bring the hostages home, and to eliminate Hamas, not contain it, but eliminate it. There is at current a pause. We're in a period, kind of an in-between period of phase 1 and phase 2. Where do we stand on phase 2 of the ceasefire hostage negotiations?
The Prime Minister has made clear that we've had no greater friend than President Trump in the White House, and his envoy, Mr. Witkoff, has made a proposition, and it's very, very clear. And it says, release the hostages for the ceasefire to continue. It's as simple as that. You let our people go. You know, we're approaching Passover now. That phrase, let our people go, resonates with us as it does with you. You let our people go. You leave Gaza. You escape with your lives. That's what the government is telling very, very clearly to Hamas. If you wish to stay, if you do not wish to release our hostages, Israel reserves the right to return to battle. And you can be sure that with the United States behind us, with our greatest ally in the world, shoulder to shoulder with us, in a way that no one else has ever seen in the history of the relationship between our two great countries, you can be sure that we will be victorious.
Along those lines, David, this week here in Israel, there was a change in the chief of staff of the IDF, new leadership coming in. And what I'm hearing on the ground here is it is kind of a sea change of orientation from a standpoint of a more aggressive approach.
Tony, our new chief of staff yesterday, and I'm sure all of us wish him well, said these two words. He said, total victory. That's what the Prime Minister has said, and that's what our Chief of Staff is committed to. And I know, because I know this from firsthand, with the bravery of our soldiers, with the commitment of our people, with the determination and our faith in the good Lord above, we will be victorious. Hamas's days are numbered. We will not live next to this death cult, no more.
I've also heard repeatedly, David, that we have to go for and this is the phrase used, the head of the snake. It's clear that Iran continues to play in this region, not only as using Hamas as a proxy. We've got Syria, there's still concerns there. But even in Judea and Samaria, I'm told that massive smuggling efforts of advanced weapons now coming into Judea and Samaria, trace back to Iran and even into Turkey. Iran still is on the list.
You know, in a few days' time, we here in Israel are celebrating the festival of Purim.
Right.
And that commemorates a victory over another Persian tyrant, Haman,
Right.
and his king Ahasuerus. So we've seen down these Persian tyrants in the past. We know that Iran is trying to ignite the region. We know that they failed with all their proxies in Lebanon, with Hamas, with the Houthis, with the Shia in Iraq. They failed in every way, but they're trying to ignite the Judea and Samaria. Our eyes are wide open, Tony. We know what they're up to, and they will not succeed.
We found out yesterday that the Trump administration has had some direct communications with Hamas, telling them to let the hostages go now. I think reinforcing the messages that President Trump has been sending. Have any Israeli officials had any contact, any further contact with Hamas?
Our Prime Minister's office yesterday made clear that we know these discussions are going ahead. We're well aware. But from Israel's point of view, there is nothing to discuss. We are discussing with our US partners. That's who we're discussing the future of this region with. You know, if Hamas want to do anything for their people, they don't, of course. They hate their own people. They want to kill as many of them as they possibly can. But they would lay down their arms, release our hostages, and move out of Gaza. If they don't, Israel will be victorious.
David, we just have 30 seconds left. What is the main thing evangelicals and Americans can be praying for Israel?
Look, the famous phrase says that at the end of this war, we won't remember what the enemy said about us. We'll remember the silence of our friends.
Yes.
Evangelicals have not been silent. They've kept their voices up high. They're heard in the White House. They're heard in the Oval Office. And we hear their prayers as well, and they have an effect. Keep doing it. Keep going forward, and together we will be successful.
David Mencer, thank you so much.